welcome back to my channel. So today I am talking about the disappearance of Suzanne Lyall, which is one that I've been meaning to speak about for a very long time, and it's something that's very important for me. I think it is a very informative video. I think it is incredibly inspiring for families that are dealing with a missing person in their life and the ways that they can take something so tragic and turn it into something that could really benefit other people and help protect other individuals down the line. But the way that her family has kind of turned the situation around and made the best of it that they possibly could is something that I feel like everybody honestly needs to hear. And on top of that, I've actually talked about Suzanne's law, which is one of the many laws that resulted from this particular case. It has helped benefit, I think, about 2 or 3 different cases that I have covered alone on this channel, and I'm sure you've heard it mentioned in other missing persons cases. So let's go ahead and just jump right on in. So Suzanne was 19 years old when she went missing on March 2nd, 1998 from Albany, New York. And ever since then, it has been an endless battle to not only find out what happened to her, but it has been a massive movement to change the way that missing persons cases are handled, not just on a state level, but also on a federal level. And to this day, there's so much work being put into finding out what exactly happened to her. Her mom still pushes to find out what happened to her and change laws. Her father pushed until he passed away in 2015. It has been incredibly inspiring, like I've already said about 15 times in this video, but let's just go ahead and get on to her disappearance. So Suzanne Lyall was born on April 6, 1978 in Saratoga Springs, New York, and she was born to Doug and Mary Lyall. She was the youngest of 3 children, and she was always referred to as the darling of the family. She was incredibly sweet and calm and quiet, but she was smart as a whip. She was so incredibly intelligent. From the youngest age, she was already taking computers apart and rebuilding them and looking into them, and her parents would kind of gather all these different computer parts that they came across, and she would find these really crazy things to do with them. So it was very clear from a young age that she was going to have a very successful life. So she ended up graduating high school with honors in 1996 and spent a year at a smaller college in New York before deciding to transfer to State University of New York in Albany in hopes of really challenging herself, getting a lot more challenging courses, and hopefully progressing to the exact place she wanted to be when it came to computer science, what she was majoring in. Now, this move altogether from the smaller college to State University of New York in Albany was a massive beneficial move for her, because she would not only be closer to her family, she'd be getting better classes, and she would also be closer to her boyfriend Richard that she had been dating since her senior year of high school. She was very close to her family, and while she was excited to go off to college, she didn't necessarily like the fact that she was so far away from them. She didn't like she was so far away from her boyfriend because he was attending a different college in Albany at the time, so this seemed like she won and had the best of both worlds. So she was excited to be closer to her family, and she always called her family or her boyfriend, or she emailed them every single day just to let them know what she was doing. She was always the kind of person that told her boyfriend where she was going when she was working, that she would talk to him afterwards. So she was one that really maintained a lot of contact with people, and this really comes into play later on. She ended up maintaining 2 different jobs while going to school to hopefully make ends meet, and it was both with, I think, computer companies. One of these jobs was in Troy, not far away from campus, and the other one was in Crossgates Mall, which was only about 2 miles west of campus. She was always one to work very hard. She knew what she wanted, she knew her goals in life, she knew who was important to her, and she made sure she catered to each one of those different aspects of her life equally. But just before her disappearance, she seemed very worried about a midterm exam. She desperately needed to not just pass this exam, but she needed to score above and beyond on it. She was very worried that she wasn't going to do that. She knew she would at least pass it, but she didn't think she was going to be able to excel above that. And on top of being worried about this midterm at the very end of February, on March 1st, she also expressed to her mom that she was struggling with money a little bit, despite the fact that she was working 2 jobs whenever she could after her classes. And she seemed upset about this, but she didn't seem like it was a life or death situation. It wasn't like she wasn't going to be able to eat. Her mom even offered to give her money until she was able to get her paycheck, and she refused this. She said she would be fine until then. It was just lower than what she wanted, and it was just stressing her out a little bit. But despite these 2 very typical stressors that college students have, midterms and money, she was in really great spirits. She didn't seem sad, she didn't seem upset, just typical stressors. The following day, on March 2nd, the day that she ended up disappearing, she went to all of her classes like normal until about 4 p.m. that day when they ended. From there, she went to her dorm, and from there she went to her job in Crossgates Mall at Babbage's. And this was, again, only 2 miles to the west, so it wasn't an incredibly far distance from her dorm. She would always take the bus to her job. There was a bus stop fairly close to her dorm. It was a very central location in the middle of the school. It was very wide open. It wasn't like it was an unsafe area. There were always people in the area, and so she took the bus like normal that day to work. And when she got there, her manager asked her about her midterm, because she had just taken this midterm that she had been so stressed out about, and she said that she thought she had done okay, but she didn't seem overly pleased or confident in this. And while she didn't seem super upset, the manager said that she seemed a little bit off that day, and they couldn't really put their finger on it. She just wasn't really acting herself. She worked at Babbage's that night until about 9 p.m. and then she got back on the bus to head to campus at around 9:20 p.m. after kind of closing everything up. From there on, there were some serious problems, but to this day, no one is 100% sure what exactly happened to her. So the next morning, Richard, her boyfriend, became a bit concerned about Suzanne because, as I said, she constantly was talking to him. She always told him where she was, when she worked, if she was going to school. They always talked to each other at night before they both decided to go to bed, whenever she got off work. And when she didn't call him after work like she was supposed to, he kind of figured something wasn't right. But he assumed again, you know, maybe she's stressed out about this midterm. She probably really overworked herself. She was studying super late. She went and worked very late. She's likely just gone to bed early. But he still didn't feel quite right, so he decided to try to find her and contact her friends and see if anyone had seen her, and not a single person had seen her come home that night. So this is when he became very, very concerned about where exactly Suzanne was. So he decided to go ahead and call Doug and Mary Lyall and tell them that he had no idea where she was, he hadn't heard from her, and basically just informed them of the situation, hoping that maybe she had called them, maybe to say that she didn't do as well in the exam or she was just overly tired and stressed out, but they hadn't heard from her either. So now everyone was wondering where on earth Suzanne went. Doug and Mary decided to call campus police to tell them that Suzanne was missing, but they seemed to believe that she had just gone off for a little bit, maybe to go to a party, or maybe she studied late at someone else's dorm and fell asleep there, and they seemed very, very positive that she would eventually come back. But Suzanne's family knew better than this. There's no way she would have gone off to a party, because she didn't party, she didn't drink, she didn't use drugs, and she was so focused on school and being successful in her career that during this time where all these midterms were happening, she never would have stayed out overnight. She would have come right home, probably called her boyfriend, studied for a bit, and then gone to bed. So this really, really wasn't adding up. So campus police kind of hopped on this bandwagon, maybe something wasn't right, and they decided to send an officer to her next class to see if she would be there, to kind of prove their theory that she probably just overslept somewhere else, but she'll be at her next class. But when they got there, Suzanne didn't show up. At this point, Suzanne's family and friends were just screaming from the top of their lungs. They knew something wasn't right, and her roommates actually really proved this as well. If she had, in fact, gone anywhere that night after work, all of her books, all of her things for school to study would have been at home, and she would have come back either early that morning or the night before to at least grab them before she left and to be prepared for school. But her roommate said that they always heard her come in at night because she kept so many keys and things on her keychain that it jingled very, very loudly. They always heard her come in, but they didn't hear a single thing that night. So she definitely hadn't come home that night and no one had seen her that next morning. And on top of that, when everyone looked in her room, it looked as if it was just totally left from how she had left it the day before. It showed no signs of her wanting to run away or do anything. She had her blow dryer still on the bed. Nothing appeared to have been taken. She even had cash on her dresser. But despite all of this mounting evidence that something was very, very wrong, campus police were still not convinced anything was happening out of the norm. This is when her parents really decided, forget this, we're taking things into our own hands. So they decided to go ahead and check her bank. And this was kind of an attempt to see if maybe she was out there trying to get things. Obviously, if she hadn't come back to the house, she would have had to get food somewhere. She would have had to get something to drink somewhere. And at the very worst, they wanted to check her bank to see if maybe she had been robbed, something had happened to her, and someone was off trying to spend her money. And when they contacted the bank, they found out that her card had in fact been used since the last person saw her. $20 had been taken out from an ATM in Stewart's Shop convenience store in Albany at 4 p.m. on March 3rd, the day after she went missing. This screamed, someone took her card to her parents, something happened to her, someone took her, robbed her, took her money, went off and tried to get it out of the ATM. You know, there's no way she would have gone that extended period of time without contacting anyone or going back home. So they went back to campus police, but still campus police believed nothing was going on. They just saw it as, oh, she's definitely out there then. She was out, she was spending her money to feed herself, she's totally fine. But that was until March 4th, the next day, when yet again, she didn't show up for any of her classes and she even missed a midterm. Campus police finally reached out to police for some help in the investigation. She was reported a missing person by her father, and a $15,000 reward was immediately put up because they honestly all believed they would be able to figure out what happened quickly, especially if they had some sort of reward out there, but they had no idea the ride they were going to be on. Family and friends spent the rest of the time putting up flyers all throughout campus and at nearby shops, hoping someone would maybe remember seeing her and come forward with a helpful tip. And then they decided to go to the bus driver that would have been the last person to have seen her that night. Now, the bus driver did confirm that she got on the bus that night. He did pick her up from Crossgates Mall to take her back home. But the one thing he wasn't sure of is if she for sure got off at her stop that she normally would have got off on to go back to her dorm. The only thing he was sure of other than that was that she definitely wasn't on the bus at the final stops in downtown. However, a few witnesses ended up coming forward saying that they saw Suzanne, in fact, get off at her typical bus stop at 9:45 p.m. So this does make it seem like Suzanne was planning on going home. She did get on the bus after work and she did in fact get off at her bus stop, but what on earth happened to her after that? Authorities had over 270 leads within the first 2 weeks, and they had searched 300 acres near Collins Circle where she would have left the bus stop to head to her dorm. They also attempted to look at CCTV footage where the money was taken out at the ATM, but unfortunately it showed more of the cashier than it did the ATM, so they were unable to confirm if it was in fact her taking the money out. The store was 2 miles east of campus, and it was in an area that she never ever would have gone to on her own. Now, I'm not sure if that means it was a more dangerous area or if it was just an area she was uncomfortable or unfamiliar with, but everyone seemed pretty set on the fact that she never would have been over there to begin with. She was very, very frugal with her money, and her parents said the only time she would ever take money out of an ATM was if it was her actual bank's ATM, because she didn't want to pay any extra charges to use a different ATM. And on top of that, just 2 days before, she had been complaining to her mother that she had absolutely not enough money and she wouldn't have just spent it all willy-nilly. She would have kept all of it in the bank. She definitely, for sure, wouldn't have gone to an ATM that wasn't hers to avoid that charge. It just really wasn't adding up. They decided to go back to the bank and ask the clerk themselves if they ever saw Suzanne that day. And unfortunately, the clerk did not remember seeing Suzanne at any period of time. What they were able to do was kind of find this man that was referred to as the Nike man. Apparently, this man had made a purchase in the convenience store almost the exact same time that the money was drawn out of the ATM. So authorities wondered if maybe this man had taken her card, taken money out, and then used the cash to buy himself something. But despite finding this man and questioning him, they honestly didn't believe he was involved in anything. He was just at the wrong place at a convenient time to seem to possibly be involved. However, they couldn't ever fully rule him out. They said they just didn't believe that he was involved. Now, as if that one ATM withdrawal on the day after everyone hadn't heard from her, in an area she wouldn't be in, from an ATM that wasn't hers that she normally wouldn't have gone to, as if all of that's not odd enough, it gets even stranger. Because when they dug a little bit deeper, they found out that this was not the only $20 ATM withdrawal that she had made. There were two other ones at two different ATMs on the day she went missing. There was one withdrawal made in the morning near Collins Circle bus stop. So right when she would have been heading to school, she pulled out $20. And then there was another one right by Crossgates Mall, right around the time she would have been going into work. And from that information, it was safe for authorities to assume she did likely make those transactions herself. But why on earth would she have taken $20 out in two different spurts during the day at ATMs that didn't belong to her bank? All of this just was completely unlike Suzanne. So while they didn't initially believe she was the one who took out the $20 at the convenience store, now they had no idea what to believe. This also confused her parents because, again, they had said she was very frugal with money. She had just said she didn't have a lot of money. She never made more than one bank withdrawal in a day. She honestly tried to avoid doing it at all costs anyways. So for her to take out $20, not just two times, but possibly three times, was very odd, especially combined with the fact that she had been complaining of being low on money. That's $60 within a little over 24 hours. For a 19-year-old, what on earth would she have needed that much money for while she said she had no money? At this point, authorities had very little information. All of it was incredibly confusing, but they were being bombarded with a huge variety of different theories from all directions. They briefly considered there was a link between her and another young woman that went missing in kind of similar circumstances 13 years prior, but I'm pretty sure they were able to pretty quickly rule that out. They considered that a convicted rapist that was out around the time potentially had done something to her, but that was also ruled out. There was also this idea they had that she was disappointed in her midterm based on the stress she had about having to do above and beyond on the midterm, and then what she had said to her manager that night right before she went missing, and the fact that she just seemed off about it afterwards. And she had taken a decent amount of money out of the bank despite the fact that she said she had none. So they wondered if maybe she was taking the money she could, she was upset, and she just kind of wanted to run off. A lot of people believed she just felt so much pressure that she really wanted to walk away from her life. She was tired of all the pressure of doing so perfect in school, not necessarily the pressure anyone else put on her, but she put a lot of pressure on herself. But a lot of people had a lot of issues with this idea that she just ran off. First of all, she was last seen at about 9:45 the night before, and at 4 p.m. the next day, she somehow only made it 2 miles away from her apartment and never went back to her dorm. So where was she the entire night? Was she staying with someone? I'm pretty sure no one came forward to claim that she was staying with them. Granted, someone could have just been keeping it a secret, but she didn't make it very far. And on top of that, if she was collecting all this money to run, why on earth would she have left the money that she had on her dresser in her dorm? It just didn't make a lot of sense, especially because the very first withdrawal of the $20 was right after she left her dorm to go to school. So you would think she would have grabbed that cash, taken it with her, and then made the first withdrawal. If she was planning to run away, it would be obvious that this was something that was premeditated. She really plan to do it. So again, why would the money be there? It just doesn't make a lot of sense. And another thing that authorities had stumbled upon was from a coworker. Now, this coworker was apparently told by Suzanne about a month prior to her disappearance that she believed she was being stalked by a stranger. But despite being stalked by someone she didn't know, she didn't appear to be very scared by this. She didn't appear to seem like she was in any danger, and they weren't really able to corroborate any of these claims. So authorities really couldn't do much with it, despite the fact that this could potentially lead them to a foul play situation. Another idea that authorities had stemmed from a man named John Ragan in 2005 when he was on a trial for abducting a female student from Saratoga Springs High School, very, very close to the school. He apparently attempted to pull her into his van, and because it was at a school, because it was an abduction, they wondered if maybe he could have also potentially abducted Suzanne. Now, they decided to look into this and they tried to question him, but even after he was convicted of the other crime, he refused to speak with Suzanne's case. Now, no one's really sure if he refuses to speak about it because he was potentially involved or because he didn't want to get pinned to another case that he wasn't responsible for, but all we know is that he's never been able to have been ruled out as a person of interest in this case. There's just not much more authorities can do with this possible theory unless he cooperates, and since he's not cooperating, it kind of led to a dead end. But 2 months after she went missing, after they finally received this information from the bus driver and from the witness that saw her get off at her bus stop, they ended up finding her Babbage's name tag in a, I think it was like student reserve parking lot, but it was 90 feet from the bus stop. So it was not at all far from the bus stop, but it was the opposite direction than she would have walked to get to her dorm. Now, authorities weren't sure how to feel about finding this name tag. My issue I have with finding this name tag 2 months later is that this area was searched before. 300 acres near the Collins Circle bus stop was searched. If this name card was only 90 feet away from the bus stop, how did no one originally find it when they first checked everything? They decided to try to do a forensic analysis on it, but they weren't able to find anything on the card. They weren't able to find any sign of multiple people's DNA or blood or anything like that, and they also were unfortunately not able to really find out how long the card had been there. I do know that I've watched a couple of interviews where they've said it had obviously been there for a while, but again, how on earth did nobody find that in the original search, just 90 feet away? They weren't really able to prove if it actually dropped the night that she disappeared, how it exactly dropped, how it got there. It was an expired card. It could have been there from another time that she accidentally dropped it. It could have been that she was attacked and it was dropped then, or that she was running off in that direction and it just somehow fell out of her bag. But the idea of being robbed and that's why the card was on the ground really threw more questions into this case, because as I stated before, this bus stop and area was wide open. Bus stop, parking lots, very, very wide open. And since it was such a central location and witnesses saw her get off the bus, how likely was it that those same witnesses, or at least other witnesses, somehow missed some sort of altercation afterwards? So just more questions left unanswered. And then kind of the final theory, a lot of people started coming forward with questions immediately, and they were all kind of about Richard, her boyfriend. There was a lot of odd information regarding their relationship. According to Suzanne's mom, Suzanne actually tried to leave him quite a number of times, but every single time Suzanne would try to leave Richard, he would get incredibly emotional and she would end up feeling terrible and couldn't go through with it and would just stay with him because she felt so bad because of his reaction. So only 2 weeks before Suzanne disappeared, Suzanne and her mom were out shopping and Suzanne asked if her mom would stop at Richard's house. It was along the way and she claimed she wanted to give him a Valentine's Day card. It was a very, very brief stop. Nothing really seemed odd about this stop, Suzanne's behavior didn't seem off, but Suzanne's mom wondered if maybe it was actually a letter in an attempt to leave the relationship again. If she maybe was finally just done, couldn't do it anymore, couldn't fake it any longer, the best way to kind of do it would probably be in a note, so she could leave it for him and leave and not see his response, since his emotional response afterwards is what really made her stay. So there's no telling if that's something that actually happened. He might have even disproved this since. But with all of that odd information, it just got even stranger. And this is where my mind starts to bring up all sorts of crazy theories. So to everyone's shock, especially Suzanne's family, Richard came forward and told police that Suzanne and him were actually engaged. Something that she had not told anybody. According to him, he had secretly proposed to her recently and they were going to get married. She was happy about this. So no one really was sure though this actually happened. I don't know if there's anyone other than him that can corroborate this idea that he proposed to her. This really didn't sit well with a lot of people, Suzanne's family and law enforcement, because again, Suzanne seemed to be an open book. She always talked to her parents. This would have been something she would have immediately called and talked to them about. Either way, all this information was odd enough for authorities to decide to bring Richard in and question him. Now they found out pretty quickly that Richard did have an alibi for that night. He claimed he was playing video games with one of his friends. So they brought his friend in, the friend had the exact same story. So they really weren't able to do much other than tell him that they really would like to take a polygraph test, and he ended up refusing it, which is his right technically, and he also said he wouldn't answer any more of their questions without a lawyer present. He remained out of any media spotlight, didn't talk to police until about 2010. He didn't actually come on and speak to the media, but his mother did, and actually asked the media to back off because he had since married and moved on, and he didn't want any part of this in his life anymore. Now, a lot of people really saw that as him kind of running from a potential problem he had created, but it equally could be that he knew he could easily be pinned for something, so he was just trying to protect himself. Within only a year of Suzanne's disappearance, her family was incredibly dissatisfied with the original investigation and particularly the campus authorities. After all, campus authorities refused to act for quite a couple of days off the assumption that she had just gone off for a bit, despite everyone saying she would never disappear even for the shortest amount of time. On top of that, they didn't really seem to have any sort of plan in place for when one of the students went missing. It was all very disorganized, and they seemed to have absolutely no drive to act on it, period. Because of this, Doug and Mary decided to take things into their own hands and make sure that laws changed in New York so that something like this didn't happen ever again, because it had happened to their daughter and this was not something they wanted any other family to go through. So they decided to reach out to state legislators, and they wanted the legislators to sponsor a bill that was formerly known as the Campus Safety Act and is now referred to as Suzanne's Law. And again, this is a law I've actually spoken about in a couple of my different videos. The law would require that colleges and universities in the state have detailed plans for when students go missing, and if a violent felony occurred on the campus, they would have to immediately contact local authorities instead of kind of waiting it out and doing their own investigation and deciding on their own when it's necessary to involve state police. The other authorities could A, be involved, B, offer their resources, and there would be a faster response. And on April 6, 1999, on Suzanne's 21st birthday, the law was passed and put through, and it was set to start in the year of 2000. But Mary and Doug refused to stop here. They knew this was a great start to ensure the safety and the future of other students that might potentially go missing or fall victims to a crime on campuses. They decided to then go on from the state level and change federal laws. Now, they specifically wanted to change the federal law that makes local police report missing persons 17 and under to the National Crime Information Center to 21 and under. Now, we talk about this limbo a lot, and a lot of the time 17 and under, they're protected by Amber Alerts and all these other things, and then the people older than that, especially college kid students, they're in this limbo. They're not required to put them into any sort of database. They are not required to put out any alert for them. These people are too old for Amber Alerts, too young for Silver Alerts. They're just really in a bad spot, and changing this federal law and making authorities have to report them to the National Crime Information Center would help bring a lot of these missing persons home. And thanks to their efforts, this was in fact signed into law as part of the Protect Act in 2003, and it's allowed authorities to also use the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children for young adults in this age frame. And if you're not aware, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children actually has a lot of their own resources. A lot of the times, local authorities and state authorities and the FBI, they all have their different resources that they use. But for instance, a lot of the ways the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children were now able to help this 18 to I think 21 limbo is they're now able to help with flyer creation, which is huge on getting exposure, and they're also able to help with age progressions, and that is absolutely massive. So not only have they passed 2 laws, one on state level, one on federal level, to ensure the safety of students at campuses and to really help these young adults in this limbo, they continue to speak out publicly of their experiences with a missing child, and in turn, they founded the Center for Hope. And this is something that I'll have linked down below. It's definitely something I think you guys should take a minute to look at. But basically, this Center for Hope helps educate authorities on their new responsibilities under the different bills and laws that have been passed, and it also helps provide information on missing persons. This is what I mean by saying that they are the most inspiring people I think I have ever looked into. They decided to take all of this anger they had and this frustration and all these emotions and push it into something that would benefit other families in case they ran into the same exact situation that the Lyalls did. And then on top of that, they didn't stop there because they made sure there was somewhere for authorities to go, somewhere for people to go to then look into all these different laws they helped pass to make sure that these laws were in fact put to use. And that's not even where they stopped. In 2008, they went on to create another federal law named the Suzanne Lyall Campus Safety Act, and that act required colleges and universities to put policies in place that clearly mapped out the responsibilities of the school, the campus police, the local police, the state police when a student went missing, to make sure there was no period of confusion about who had the right to do what, when someone had the right to do what, in hopes that immediate clear actions could be taken. Because again, campus police did not have a clear idea of what they were supposed to do. There wasn't a time when they were kind of forced to hand things over to local police, for local police to then hand things over to state police, and then eventually the FBI. And without that, it created all these lags in the case. Had campus police had a plan put in place and policies put in place that would have forced them to immediately inform local police of the situation, everything would have gone so much faster. It would have required them to actually do something when she went missing instead of sitting back and waiting. Again, this drastically would change how a lot of missing persons cases would go from there on out. Unfortunately, Doug did end up passing away in 2015 without ever knowing what happened to his daughter, but I'm happy that he at least was able to pass away knowing how many other daughters he potentially saved by pushing so incredibly hard for new laws. This past October, Mary had plans to push for a statewide cold case unit. Currently, most cold cases are just kind of dispersed to different investigators that are also working on daily crimes, and it can be very hard to work on the amount of daily crimes that come in and balance that with the cold cases. And a lot of the times, because the daily crimes are more relevant and they need to be acted on incredibly fast, the cold cases are just kind of sat in the back and no one messes with them. And if they required cold case units statewide, so many cases would have the potential to get the attention they need to finally close them up and get answers and justice. Suzanne's case is now classified and being investigated as a homicide, and it's clear to authorities and her family that she wasn't the type of person to run off, and I'm assuming this is the main reason why they've classified it as a homicide. I'm guessing that, paired with the fact that she has never shown up anywhere. Even if she hadn't done the best with her midterm, she was brilliant and she would have made a name for herself regardless. It wasn't like her to just give up and go. That's just not her character. It's not her personality, not who she just was as a person in general. She seemed very stressed out about quite a few things, and that seems to be the main thing pointing towards why some people believe that she did in fact run off and there is no foul play involved. Are typical stressors that college students go through. Now, I personally have a lot of questions when it comes to foul play, especially about the proposal being a secret. You tend to to not hide things unless you're either ashamed of them or embarrassed of them. I've been in many relationships where something has happened that I've purposely not told my parents or anyone I know because I'm not even certain about the situation. And to me, I honestly wonder if that was the case. If she had in fact wanted to leave Richard and his emotional reaction and response to this upset Suzanne enough to stay with him despite the fact that she clearly didn't want to be with him, I wonder if maybe when he proposed to her, it was the same situation. She felt like she had to say yes. And I also wonder if maybe this proposal was a desperate attempt. He even said it was secret and last minute. I wonder if he knew something was happening. I wonder if the card that she did give to him for Valentine's Day was in fact a breakup card, and his last attempt at getting her to stay was to propose to her because he knew it would tug at her emotionally. And honestly, I wonder if maybe that and the other stressors, maybe she really did decide to leave. Maybe she realized that she could not get out from underneath of Richard. She felt too bad saying no to him, and the only way for her to escape all of her problems and stresses was just by running off. However, on the flip side, it also easily could be that she was being followed by someone, like she said to her coworker. Maybe this person that had been following her for a certain amount of time knew that she worked 2 jobs, knew what kind of career she was trying to go into, assumed she had money, said that she needed to go start pulling out money to give to them. Now, maybe she did it in small amounts that day to not immediately send out any red flags or put any alert up to anybody. It's possible that she was supposed to meet this person before she went home that night. You know, what if this person was like, you get this money to me by this day? You know, maybe that's why she told her mom she was low on money. Maybe she was hoping her mom would offer her money so she would have more to give this person. And maybe she ended up backing out because she was like, no, I can't do this. I feel too bad. I can't, you know, take money from my parents to please this person. And let's say she got on the bus. That's why she was acting odd at work that night, because she was nervous about meeting this person. And let's say she was supposed to meet them in that parking lot. And let's say the money just wasn't enough and they got mad at her and they took her or took all of her belongings. There might have been some sort of physical altercation there. Perhaps this is when her card fell out of her bag. But then after that, where would this person have put her? I feel like they wouldn't have gone very far with her. Maybe it was their intention to take her from the get-go. But honestly, I have no idea what to think. There's really just no telling. I can understand why this case has gone unsolved because there's a lot of odd pieces and none of them make sense all put together and all lead kind of different directions. So I'd be very, very interested to see what you guys have to say about this. Honestly, my main reason for wanting to get this out there was, again, to inform you guys of the different laws that were put in place because of this. And if there are any family members or parents or loved ones of missing persons out there that feel stuck and like they can't do anything, you can do what this family did and you can make a difference for other people. I feel like a lot of people feel so stuck and so upset and so lost, and it consumes them, and they feel like they have nothing from there on in their life unless it's finding their loved one. But honestly, this could change that for a lot of people. It could give these people something that they need, which is that they did make a difference, at least for someone. And seeing how hard her family pushed and turned such a tragedy into something that helps so many people, again, it's just so incredibly inspiring to me. And let me know what you guys think down below. Let me know if you see anything in this case that I haven't really thought of. And don't forget also to hit the subscribe button to become a member of the Hallan fam, so hopefully we can bring them home together. And I will see you guys in my next video. Bye.